Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever tried to get your head around quantum mechanics, you hit this wall almost immediately.
The wave particle thing.
The wave particle thing,
Yeah,
exactly. Is
okay.
it a wave? Is it a particle? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. You need a whole new language.
A new framework.
And that's our mission today. We are going straight into Chapter 2 of Feynman's Lectures, Volume 3, to really pull apart the absolute fundamentals. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. And the big shift here is that we have to completely abandon the old classical picture, a little ball bearing flying on a predictable path.
That's gone.
It's gone. Instead, we have to talk about something called an amplitude.
Okay.
For every possible thing a particle could do, every event, we assign it an amplitude. And here's the absolute core of it. The probability you actually see that event happen is the absolute square of that amplitude.
So that's the first big question for me. If we only ever measure the probability, which is, a simple real number, why start with this more complicated thing, the amplitude? Why does it have to be a complex number?
That is the million-dollar question. And Feynman nails it. It has to be complex to explain interference.
Interference, like waves on a pond.
Exactly. If we just use probabilities, like numbers from 0 to 1, they would always just add up. You could never have two possibilities cancel each other out.
But particles do cancel each other out.
Particles act like waves, and waves interfere. You get constructive interference where they build up and destructive interference where they cancel out. To get that cancellation, you need a phase. And that's what the complex number gives you. It has a magnitude and a phase. That's the whole machine right there.
So the complex amplitude is what lets matter behave like a wave. Okay?
Sure.
So if we're describing particles with waves, we have to connect the wave properties like frequency to particle properties, energy, momentum.
That's the next step. And there are two just foundational relationships here. First, a particle's energy, E, is directly proportional to the frequency of its wave, omega.
So more energy means a faster oscillation.
A much faster oscillation in time. The formula is E equals h bar omega. And second, the particle's momentum, p, is proportional to what's called the wave number, k.
Which is what, like how bunched up the wave is in space?
Exactly. Tightly packed waves mean high momentum. The formula is almost the same. P equals h bar k. That little symbol, h bar, is just Planck's constant. It's like the fundamental currency of quantum action.
And once you have those two ideas,
Yeah,
you sort of stumble directly into the concept of uncertainty.
it becomes unavoidable.
Yeah, so let's visualize it. Imagine a particle is represented by a little packet of waves, a wave train. If that packet is really short, say over a tiny distance, delta x,
And its position really well. It's right there inside that little packet.
if you try to measure the wavelength of that super short wave train,
You can't. It's ill-defined. You don't have enough crests and troughs to get a precise measurement. And if the wavelength is fuzzy, the wave number is fuzzy, which means
momentum is fuzzy.
the momentum is poorly defined. You've traded knowledge of position for knowledge of momentum.
And this isn't just a measurement problem, right? This feels like it's baked into reality.
It is. Let's make it concrete with the slit experiment.
Yeah, okay.
Imagine you're firing electrons at a wall with a single, very narrow vertical slit in it. The width is, let's call it delta x.
So by making the slit narrow, I'm forcing the electron's vertical position to be very certain as it passes through.
Exactly. Classically, you just expect a little stripe on the screen behind it.
A shadow of the slit.
Right. But what you actually see is that the electrons spread out. They diffract. Some land way up high, some way down low.
Which means they must have picked up some vertical momentum after going through the slit.
A whole range of vertical momenta, delta px. You squeezed the position certainty, and the universe responded by increasing the momentum uncertainty.
And there's a mathematical rule for this trade-off.
There is. It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It says the uncertainty in position, delta x, times the uncertainty in momentum, delta px, has to be approximately equal to or greater than that constant h bar.
You can't make both of them zero.
Never. If you shrink one, the other gets bigger. It's a fundamental limit.
And this isn't just for position and momentum. The source mentions it applies to other pairs too.
Oh, absolutely. The big one is energy and time. If you want to measure the energy of a particle with extreme precision, which means measuring its frequency, delta omega, very accurately, you have to observe it for a very long time, delta t.
So high certainty in energy means high uncertainty in when the event actually happened.
The same principle, just different variables.
Okay, that makes sense. So if that's the limit, how do we ever measure momentum accurately?
Yeah.
Let's say I really need to know the momentum of a particle.
You use a diffraction grating. To get a really sharp, well-defined wavelength and therefore momentum, you need the wave to pass over a very long grating, a grating with many, many lines.
So a longer grating give a better momentum measurement.
Much better. But now think about the particle's position.
Ah. If the wave train has to be long to interact with the whole grating, then the particle could be anywhere along that entire length.
Exactly. The uncertainty in its position, delta x, is now basically the length of your whole apparatus. You made the momentum uncertainty tiny, and the position uncertainty balloon to compensate. It always balances out.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. We move from these thought experiments to actual matter, crystal diffraction.
Yes, a fantastic application. You fire beam X-rays, electrons, even neutrons at a crystal.
And the atoms in the crystal are arranged in this perfect repeating lattice.
Right, and the waves scatter off those layers of atoms, but you only get a strong reflection, a bright spot, at very specific angles.
That happens when the waves bouncing off of, say, the top layer and the next layer down arrive perfectly in sync.
In phase. Their crests line up, they reinforce each other, and you get a huge signal. That condition is called Bragg's law.
And by measuring the angles where you get those bright spots, you can work backwards.
And figure out the spacing between the atoms in the crystal. You're using the quantum wave nature of particles to map the invisible structure of matter. It's incredible.
What I found really surprising, though, was what the different particles interact with. X-rays and electrons, they scatter off the electron clouds.
They do, but neutrons are different.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Neutrons have no charge, so they basically ignore the electrons and scatter almost entirely off the tiny, dense nucleus at the center of the atom.
So they're seeing something completely different.
Totally different. It means neutrons can fly straight through materials like graphite that are totally opaque to X-rays. They're probing the nuclear structure, not the electronic structure.
And the book briefly connects all of this back to why atoms are stable in the first place. It's the uncertainty principle again.
It is. If an electron tried to fall into the nucleus, its position would become incredibly certain, confined to that tiny little space.
And its momentum would have to be...
Hugely uncertain. It would acquire such a massive random momentum that it would immediately be kicked right back out. The uncertainty principle literally props the atom up and prevents it from collapsing. It's responsible for the size of things.
Which brings us to the philosophical side of all this. I mean, if we can't simultaneously know a particle's position and momentum,
Yeah.
what does that say about reality?
It forces a complete rethink. Classical physics was all about describing things, even things you couldn't measure, like the exact path of a particle.
The idea that the information is there, we just can't get to it.
Right. But quantum mechanics suggests that if a concept can't be measured, even in principle like the exact position of a particle with a known momentum, then maybe that concept doesn't belong in physics. Maybe it's not real.
That's a huge leap.
It's a fundamental lesson. Indeterminacy isn't a flaw in our tools, it's a property of the universe. Quantum mechanics doesn't predict the exact outcome for one event. It predicts the probabilities over many, many events.
And Feynman makes a great point that even classical physics wasn't perfectly predictable in practice.
No, not at all. His example is a drop of water falling from a dam. In theory, you could predict where it lands. But in practice, a tiny puff of wind, an unmeasurable vibration, it throws the whole calculation off.
But that's a practical limit. The quantum limit is different.
It's a fundamental limit. It's a property of reality itself. And he argues we should actually welcome this. It frees us from this old deterministic idea of a clockwork universe where everything is preordained.
So let's bring this all together for everyone listening. What are the key takeaways from this chapter?
Okay, I'd say number one, quantum events are described by these things called amplitudes. They have to be complex numbers to allow for interference. What we actually observe is the probability, which is the amplitude squared.
Right. And two, position and momentum are locked in this trade-off, the uncertainty principle. You can know one well or the other well, but never both perfectly. And this isn't our fault. It's just the way things are.
And that very principle is what makes atoms stable.
Exactly. And three, the wave properties of particles are real and incredibly useful. We use them with things like Bragg's law to see the structure of crystals, revealing the atomic world.
That's the whole framework right there. But here's a final thought to chew on.
Okay.
If we accept that at the most fundamental level, there's an inherent indeterminacy, a limit to what can be known, does that change how we should think about predicting large-scale systems?
Like the economy or the climate.
Exactly. Things that are built out of quantum parts, but that we model with classical deterministic rules. Is it possible that this fundamental quantum uncertainty eventually, over long enough timescales, becomes the ultimate bottleneck on our ability to predict anything?
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying thought to take with you. Thank you for sharing your sources and helping us get to the heart of this.
My pleasure.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.